What if the world we are watching right now is not just another round of headlines? What if the world is not simply going through tension, but entering a season where the pressure is building on every side? Because right now, the Middle East is still sitting on the edge of a fragile ceasefire. Iran is issuing warnings. The U.S. is weighing its next move. Israel is preparing for a future that may look very different from the past. Russia is watching, and China is stepping into the room. Europe is rearming. NATO territory is seeing rare military signals, and even off the coast of Cuba, U.S. intelligence flights are reportedly increasing. This is not one isolated event. It is not one nation. It is not one battlefield. It is a nations moving, aligning, warning, preparing, and reacting. And when you step back and look at the whole picture, it feels like the world is being pulled into something much bigger. The Bible told us that there'd be wars and rumors of wars. It told us that nation would rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. It told us there'd be distress of nations with perplexity. And while we do not set dates and we do not claim to know the exact timing of everything, we are told to watch. And right now, there is a lot to watch. Because from Iran to Israel, to Russia to China, to Europe to Cuba, the headlines are not just calming down, they are intensifying. So let's start in the Middle East because this is where the temperature is rising fast. According to reports, Iran has issued threats against U.S. ships, warning that assets in the region could be targeted if tensions erupt again. Other reports say Iran's Revolutionary Guard has warned that missiles are already locked onto targets in the Persian Gulf. President Trump said on Tuesday that the United States is maintaining a firm stance in negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program, underscoring what he described as recent military success and economic leverage ahead of his trip to China. Speaking to reporters before leaving, the president drew a clear red line against Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. He said, "Well, we're going to see, and we'll be thinking about it on the flight, and we'll be thinking about it for the next little while." The president went on to highlight that the U.S. had beaten their military very soundly. He said that's over with. The blockade is very effective. It's been 100% effective. And one way or another, it's going to work out very well. On top of the oil and economy, Trump said that the U.S. was going to have so much oil. He said, "You're going to have a gusher of oil like you've never had before." Shifting to the key issue of Iran's nuclear program, which has stalled talks between the two nations, the president insisted that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They will not, he said, have a nuclear weapon. They know that, and they've agreed to it. He also went on to say in conclusion that the United States does not play games. In the meantime, the UK government announced on Tuesday that it would be contributing mine hunting equipment, Typhoon fighter jets, and the warship HMS Dragon to a defensive mission to help secure shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Senator Lindsey Graham said during a Senate hearing on Tuesday that President Trump should realize that the Chinese president is propping up Russia and Iran. He made the comment while asking Pete Hegseth about Chinese purchases of Russian and Iranian oil. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, told Fox News last week that China had been buying 90% of Iranian oil, while Graham said on Tuesday that China is the largest buyer of Russian oil. So President Trump, when you go to China, realize that the person you're talking to is propping up Russia and Iran. He said if the mediator is allowing reconnaissance aircraft of Iran to be parked in Pakistani air bases, do you think that's consistent with being a fair mediator? He also went on to say that I don't trust Pakistan as far as I can throw them. So the distrust is definitely there and the pressure is still building. President Trump also reportedly said that the ceasefire is on life support. And according to other reports, the administration is weighing renewed military operations after negotiations broke down. One official was quoted as saying that Trump is going to hit them a bit. Another reportedly said we wanted an agreement, but now everyone understands where this is heading. So definitely some serious language all around. And this is the thing. If diplomacy begins to break down and military options move back to the table, the situation can change very quickly. One day leaders are talking about peace, the next day they are preparing for strikes. And this is the world we are living in right now, where everything feels unstable, where every agreement feels temporary, and where every ceasefire feels like it could collapse with one decision. Now, reports also say that Russia is sending Iran drone parts through the Caspian Sea, maybe bypassing the blockade altogether. If true, that would be significant because it would allow Iran to restock parts of its drone arsenal while avoiding some of the most watched intense routes in the region. And think about what that means. While one side talks about ceasefire, another side may be rebuilding. While one talks about negotiations, another side may be preparing for the next round. This is what makes a ceasefire so fragile. It's not just about whether the missiles stop for a few days. It's about what is happening during the pause. Now, there are also reports that Israel built a secret base in the Iraqi desert to support its Iranian air campaign. The report claims that Israeli troops launched airstrikes against Iraqi forces who nearly discovered the airbase in early March. And at the time, Iraq blamed the U.S. for the strikes. Again, if these reports are accurate, this shows the depth of the regional war behind the public narrative. The Bible gives so much attention to Israel, Jerusalem, surrounding nations, and the final day alignment of the kingdoms. Now, that does not mean every headline is the fulfillment of prophecy, but it does mean that every movement around Israel indeed matters. Every peace deal, every ceasefire, every betrayal, every regional alliance, it all deserves our attention. And then there is Israel itself. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently said that he wants American financial support for Israel to be drawn down to zero over the next decade. He said that Israel receives about $3.8 billion a year, and he believes it is time for Israel to wean itself off the remaining military support from the U.S. Now, that is a major statement because for decades, U.S. support has been one of the foundations of Israel's security relationship. Now, we know ultimately God's hand is on Israel because eventually Jesus will rule from Jerusalem. But now Netanyahu is saying that Israel should begin moving towards independence from that financial support. And prophetically, that is very interesting because scripture shows Israel standing at the center of end time events, but it also shows a time when Israel will be increasingly isolated, surrounded, pressured, and forced into decisions that reshape the region. A more independent Israel, a more hostile region, a more divided world, a more unstable alliance system. Now, while the Middle East is burning hot, China is stepping into the spotlight. President Trump is expected to meet with the Chinese president in Beijing, and China's embassy said that the Chinese president plans to discuss world peace and major issues concerning bilateral relations, developments, stability in a volatile world, etc., etc. On the surface, that sounds diplomatic. It sounds calm. It sounds like leaders trying to manage global instability. But look at the timing. This meeting is happening while Iranian tensions are still high. China has strong economic ties with Iran. China has criticized U.S. military action, and Trump is going into this meeting with the Middle East, Taiwan, trade, technology, and global power all sitting in the background. Now, other reports say that the president will be joined by Elon Musk and other major CEOs at the Chinese summit. That matters because this is not just about politics. It's about economics. It is about technology. It is artificial intelligence. It's global supply chains. It is a military competition. It is influence over the future of the world system. And when powerful governments and powerful corporate leaders gather in the same room, we should definitely be paying attention because the future is not only being shaped by armies anymore. It is being shaped by technology companies, surveillance system, artificial intelligence, financial systems, digital ID, global trade, and military alliances all at once. From a biblical perspective, we already know where the world is headed. Not because we know every detail of every headline, but because scripture shows us a world moving towards increased control, increased deception, increased conflict, and increased global cooperation around systems that will eventually become hostile to God. That is why these summits matter. That is why these alignments matter. That is why we watch China, Russia, Iran, and the West. And as China enters the conversation, Russia is also making headlines. Reports say that Putin is stockpiling so-called unkillable fiber optic drones for a future assault on NATO. These drones are reportedly difficult to jam because they are controlled by physical fiber optic cables instead of relying on traditional radio signals. Now, that may sound technical, but the meaning is simple. Warfare is evolving. The battlefield is changing. Drones are no longer just cheap tools used by smaller groups. They are becoming central weapons in modern warfare. They can hunt, they can surveil, they can strike, they can overwhelm defenses. And now if nations are developing drones that are harder to detect, harder to jam, and harder to stop, then future wars could look very different from the wars of the past. And that's not all Putin has been up to. Apparently, he has successfully tested the Satan II nuclear capable missile. The name alone of this missile should tell you something. But the apocalyptic 208-ton intercontinental silo-launched 15,880 miles per hour missile as tall as a 14-story tower block. Now, a plainly gloating Putin said today that the Sarmat will carry 4 times more payload than its Western counterparts. He also called it the most powerful missile system in the world and said it would soon be deployed on combat duty. He boasted that the total yield of the delivered warhead is more than 4 times greater than any existing Western equivalent. Most importantly, he said, the missile can travel not only on a ballistic trajectory, but also on a suborbital one. Thirdly, it allows for a range of over 21,000 miles, while simultaneously doubling its missile defense performance. And finally, it has the ability to penetrate all existing and prospective missile defense systems. At the end of this year, the Sarmat will indeed be deployed on combat duty. Now, despite today's success, it's only the second known successful test of a rocket that has been jinxed. Despite Putin's boast that it has been close to deployment, the RS-28 Sarmat, the world's largest missile, has only had one previous successful test, and that was in April of 2022. Now, on the other hand, Putin has also recently said that he believes that the Ukrainian war may be coming to a completion amid a Trump-brokered ceasefire effort. But let's move along and talk about what is going on in Europe. Reports say that Europe's sleeping giant is rearming, with Germany increasing its defense posture amid fears of a wider confrontation with Russia. Spain is also calling for a European Union army. Now, this is a major development. For years, the idea of a stronger European military structure has been discussed, debated, and delayed. But now, the pressure of war in Ukraine, fear of Russia, uncertainty about U.S. support, and the instability of the world are forcing Europe to rethink its future. And prophetically, Europe matters, because many Bible prophecy watchers have long paid attention to the rise of a revived European power structure, especially in connection to the final world system described in Daniel and Revelation. Now, again, we have to be careful. We do not want to force headlines into prophecy, but we do watch the trends. And one of the trends we are watching is Europe moving towards a stronger military independence, deeper defense cooperation, and calls for a united army. That is not a small thing, because when Europe begins to rearm, when leaders begin calling for an EU army, and when NATO territory becomes central in military announcements, we are watching the architecture of power shift. And speaking of NATO territory, the U.S. Navy made a rare disclosure that an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine arrived in Gibraltar, a British overseas territory. The U.S. Navy said that the port visit demonstrates America's capability, flexibility, and continued commitment to NATO allies. They also described the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines as undetectable launch platforms for submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Now, usually, movements of nuclear-armed submarines are not publicly emphasized like this unless a message is being sent. And that is exactly what this appears to be, a signal to allies and a signal to adversaries, a signal that nuclear deterrence is still part of the global equation. With nuclear in mind, let's talk about North Korea. According to reports, Kim Jong-un has ordered an automatic nuclear strike policy. Now, whether people dismiss North Korea or not, that kind of language should never be ignored, especially with their relationship with China and Iran and Russia. And also because automatic nuclear response means less room for diplomacy, less room for human decision-making. The biggest fear in global conflict is not always that one leader intentionally starts a world war. Sometimes the danger is the mistake. Misread signals, bad intelligence, a drone strike that goes too far, a ship targeted in disputed waters, a leader thinking they have no choice. And when nuclear powers begin putting automatic strike language into their discussion, the margin for error shrinks. That's why all of these moments right now feel so serious, because many nations are not simply disagreeing. They are preparing systems for worst case scenarios. They are hardening their defenses. They are moving assets. They are building drones. They are calling for armies. They are signaling nuclear capability. But what's going on with Cuba? According to reports, U.S. intelligence gathering flights are surging off of Cuba. For decades, Cuba has carried deep geopolitical significance because of its proximity to the U.S. and its historic ties to Russia. And as we know from prior reports, the president, as well as some in his cabinet, have hinted that after Iran, Cuba would be next. So are we going to see another Venezuela, or will Cuba negotiate? Only time will tell. So, what is the conclusion of the matter for this report? Well, we are definitely in the season of wars and rumors of wars, as noted by Jesus in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It all falls perfectly into place, just as prophecy warned us it would. But I would love to hear from all of you. What do you think about Trump's meeting with the Chinese president? Do you think this ceasefire will hold between Iran and the United States and Israel? What about Russia and what he's doing? Do you think he will eventually try to invade NATO? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But that's what I have for you guys today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a breaking news report. Come on over to my other social media sites and visit with me. I'd love to see you guys there. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next time, God bless and stay safe.